Hey guys, welcome to Tyson's Fitness Tips Podcast. If you want to lose weight, increase your energy, improve your health and fitness, and look your best, then you have come to the right place. My name is Tyson Brown. I'm a personal trainer, and my job is to help you transform your body by sharing with you the most up-to-date information on health and fitness. I'm going to distill it all down for you into bite-sized actionable steps that you can take immediately to see results quickly. Now, every Tuesday and Thursday, you can expect a brand new episode, which will be a mixture of interviews with top experts from around the world in the fitness space, and as well as solo episodes from myself, sharing with you exactly what action steps you need to take to transform your health, your body, and your life. Also, don't forget to listen all the way to the end of the show, because in the middle, I'm going to share with you a time-saving tip, and it might just be a game changer. I know you're short on time, and this one can save you a lot of time and a lot of energy. So, let's get into the show. What is going on, guys? It is Tyson Brown here today with another episode of Tyson's Fitness Tips. And I have actually brought on a very special guest because he is a guy I listen to on the weekly through his podcast, Iron Radio. So I would like to welcome to the show today, Lonnie Lowery. Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
Thanks, Tyson. I appreciate it. Doing well.
Excellent. So, Lonnie, for those of the people who don't know who you are, can you just do a quick explanation about what you do and what Iron Radio is?
Sure. By trade, I'm an academic. I went to school all the way through school in exercise physiology, so I got my doctorate in that, and then I went back to school and I got my second master's and my license to practice in nutrition and dietetics. So I teach sort of a hybrid of those two things at university, and I've done that for 17 or 18 years now. And about 9 years ago, I got together with Phil Stevens and Rob Fortney, and we decided to just sort of give back to the fitness community. There's so much non-evidence-based, sort of opinion-based, this sounds judgmental, but sort of clueless banter, and misinformation in the fitness and nutrition world that we thought we would start a podcast. And so, we're at 425 episodes as of today. So we've been doing it for a long time. It's Iron Radio, ironradio.org, or we're on iTunes and YouTube, sort of all over the place, I suppose. And so that's a way that I can stay involved in the broader sports nutrition and fitness industry and not just sort of hole up in my lab and do my little coffee studies and that sort of thing.
Awesome. And so a lot of the people I obviously interview are usually trainers, but you've actually, you've been through the academic side of things, Lonnie. So what made you decide to pursue that route?
I got interested in bodybuilding at a very early age. This sounds sort of cheesy to some people, but Tom Platz used to talk about having a calling for it, almost like a priest has a calling, into religion. And that happened to me. I just, to be completely transparent, that's what happened. My sister bought me Flex magazine in 1983 with Samir Bannout on the cover, winning the Mr. Olympia. And she did it like a joke because I was already sort of benching cement and plastic plates off my bedroom floor and, trying to grow and become stronger and that sort of thing. And I was just enamored with this idea that you can adapt and change yourself and become bigger and better and, stronger than your former self and a lot of the people around you and that sort of thing. And so I started buying my own muscle magazines. And even back in the day, in the 80s, and throughout the 90s, in fact, that's one of the ways I met Rob Fortney, who does Iron Radio with me, is he was an editor at Muscle Mag International for many years, which is a huge muscle magazine. And you can really pick, and choose the best little nuggets of information in some of those articles. They weren't exactly peer-reviewed, big reference list kinds of things, but I just loved it. I loved everything about it. And I competed all the way up until just a few years ago. So it's really shaped my academic career as well. I got into exercise science not because I was a sort of a team athlete, sort of traditional jock type. I always did weird things, martial arts and bodybuilding and pole vaulting and things like that. But I was just fascinated by the idea that what you put in your body and then the kind of stimulus that you provide in the gym you can mold yourself, and so that's really, like I said, my personal and athletic interests just merged with my academic ones.
That's really cool. And obviously, you have the experience of both sides, not just not just talking the talk and studying, but you actually applying that into your own life, doing bodybuilding and things like that. So you have a lot of experience in both of those side of things too.
Yeah, I've competed several times. When if I'm going to diet for half a year and get down to like 4% body fat, dang it, I'm going to compete more than once. So I would drive around and compete. And like I said, the last time I did that was 2011, 2012. I did okay. I sort of tried to pit my knowledge base against guys who were potentially using performance-enhancing medications, drugs. And I would always be a finalist, like between second and fifth place usually. And sometimes that was gratifying. As I got older, this most recent round I competed as a masters athlete. And, when there's 25 guys in your class and you're in the open division, right? So people could be using something, some are not. In the open division, some are young, some are old. I didn't just do the masters. I competed against the younger guys too. And I think it validated for me that you can, in fact, learn your way to success in a sense, that I felt like I was competitive. I was a light heavyweight, right? So it's really hard for me to be 4 or 5% body fat at 198 pounds. That's really hard to do. And it takes a long time, decades, I think, to become that heavy with muscle tissue, and then also to try to lean it down so slowly, But so I feel like I do have some of that competitive cred, although, compared to the guys in the magazines, certainly not.
Bit of credibility is better than anything, though, right?
A little is all I've got.
So you having that experience of being, in the heavier range, but still being able to keep your body fat so low. Obviously, there's certain things that you've figured out over the years when it comes to nutrition and helping you lose body fat. So I want to ask you a couple of questions about, some of the top things you did to actually help keep lean when it came to the nutrition side of things. So let's talk about, first of all, when it came to eating a certain amount of protein a day, how much protein would you usually consume in a day?
Oh, that's a good question. Some of what I did personally, I think we need to separate target date diets like a bodybuilder will do. Like I'm a big fan of 20-week diets, and they're very progressive, but toward the end, they're not sustainable, right? Versus what I would do with a weight management client, or I've done these 10-week clinics before in the past. Those sorts of behavioral interventions would be a little bit different, right? So I would eat, I usually shoot for about a gram of protein per pound of body mass every day, body weight every day. So that's a surplus, but it helps with a sense of fullness, and it keeps your metabolism on its toes and that sort of thing. So lots of chicken, whey protein shakes and things of that nature. I wouldn't necessarily have all, if I was working with a client, necessarily have them eat quite that much protein. Although, and honestly, I even went up from there. So there isn't a study around, I think, that would suggest the amount of protein I was eating in that last month before a competition is necessary. But I was eating even more than a gram of protein per pound, maybe all the way up to a gram and a half.
Oof.
Excuse me. And I think it's just because you're eating so little in that unsustainable last few weeks, you have to eat something or you'll go mad. So I was just eating lots of vegetables and chicken like it's going out of style. And in fact, backstage, I would sort of quasi-interview other competitors and be like, how did you diet? How do you do that? Do you focus on carbs? How much protein do you eat? A lot of the same things that we're talking about here. So it's sort of the academic side of me. I felt like here's my chance to be among this culture. I want to see what they do. So the protein intakes are usually very high. But yeah, I would suggest, for most people, I don't know. And this is a lot of dietitians would even think I'm crazy, and I am one of them. But 30 or 40 grams of protein every meal, maybe 4 times a day for a lot of people. That usually helps with fullness and satiety and all those sorts of things. But I would eat even more than that. Again, because I was a little heavier. I was trying to diet down from about 225 down into the 190s. So I'd have to lose 30 pounds. And that's another reason the numbers, I think, were bigger for me, because I think I was bigger, than the average housewife. So, the numbers got kind of big.
Okay, fair enough. And so 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal 4 times a day, that's going to be plenty for most people, obviously. So we always make sure if we are getting those 30 to 40 grams of protein, it's going to be enough, to prevent losing muscle mass and things when they're actually losing weight too.
I think so.
Yeah.
That is way above the recommended dietary allowance. In fact, the recommended dietary allowance is going to be around 50 or 60 grams across an entire day, right? And the Institute of Medicine here in the States, they don't have a category. Like, we don't have an RDA table for athletes or for dieters. They just say, no, 0.8 grams per kg per day. That's the amount of protein people need. But that's not really based on optimal muscle mass or physique. That's sort of just an effort not to have people deficient in some way, like their immune system tanking or something like that. So, the literature is quite different between the general population and what a lot of the government nutrition authorities will suggest, and what someone who's interested in physique would eat.
Absolutely. It's just funny how there's such a big difference between those two.
There are actually there's a couple of researchers that I know, world-class guys, Stu Phillips and Nick Bird, and those guys. They do a lot of protein synthesis work, and they're too professional to be frustrated, but you can almost sense an element of frustration with them as they try to educate some of these working groups, these federal, these governmental bodies that make these recommendations for the public, and they're just so stubborn and reticent to actually increase that daily allowance a little bit, and I just think that's strange, and it may be food industry driven, right? When you walk into the grocery store, what's the most expensive type of food or nutrient? It's protein. Skinless, boneless chicken breasts cost way more than rice, or dried bags of dried beans or those sorts of things. So it's sort of industry and economically driven, I think, that you don't see broad spectrum recommendations. Hey, go eat more animal proteins, complete proteins. The people who a lot of people would say it's not sustainable, it's not affordable. So there's those kinds of things, I think, that trickle into those governmental guidelines too. But if you're interested in physique and leanness, you go for your 40 grams or so every meal. And again, animal-type proteins, whey and casein, lean meats, things of that nature.
Okay, excellent to know. So at least we've got that. It's 30 to 40 grams in 4 meals a day, and making sure that it's coming from animal-based proteins, because they're going to be complete proteins the whole time.
That's right. And I think, in fact, there was a paper that came out just last year. I can't quote. I think it was probably Stu Phillips' group again. And he was talking about how we might have even mentioned this on Iron Radio in recent months, but there's a discrepancy, right, between what the physiologists are saying, which is animal proteins are best. They're complete proteins. They're best for muscle protein synthesis and muscle retention and all those sorts of things. And then, again, the policymakers and the people who are interested in sustainability and that sort of thing, they'll push the plant proteins. But there are very few physique athletes. There are a few, but there are quite a few that really don't. They're just not buying into this whole we need to eat only plant proteins. They're going to go for what the physiologists are saying is best for muscle protein synthesis, and that's the quality animal proteins.
It's good to know. It's good. I guess at the end of the day, like when you look at it back in our ancestral days too, it's not like we never didn't eat meat. Meat was an essential part of our diet.
Meat, milk, eggs, all of the above. Very, very high quality zoochemicals. There's other things in meats, carnitine, creatine. Meat is very nutrient rich. I know not everybody's equally excited about meat. If you're not, you just have to work around it. So, you'd have to do with the complementary proteins like grains and beans and try to work around it. Like I said, there's very few bodybuilders who have been really high level and their whole career they were vegan. I do think it can be done. but it would be a special challenge.
Yeah, if someone wants to take on that challenge, they can let us know, but I'm not looking forward to that one. When it comes to like talking about nutrition, Lonnie, what do you recommend when people are trying to cut weight to actually keep satiated through the day? Now, I know you said protein is satiating, but what else do you recommend people do?
Yeah, well, I was just sort of really pushing meat, but vegetables are very, very important on numerous levels. One is fiber, especially soluble fiber, whether you get that from oats or apples or different vegetables or what have you, soluble fiber. So I can tell you, and this isn't just what I used to do when I would try to get lean, but even with clients, if you seek something on the order, and it's going to differ from person to person, but maybe 10 grams of fiber per meal. So if you have 4 meals a day, that'd be a total of 40 grams of fiber per day. That's quite a bit. So you're seeking fiber, especially soluble fiber, because it tends to form a gel in the gut, and it's filling. It helps reduce blood sugar swings and things like that. So, right, protein and fiber are some of the best suggestions. I think maybe a distant third would be some healthy fats as well. I think when we eat completely fat-free, or we try, I don't think that works, like population-wide. Like I can tell you, when I was a kid decades ago, there weren't nearly as many fat people. And we ate more fat, dietary fat. It seems like throughout the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, we really kept pushing toward the low-fat and fat-free. And I think that's actually a mistake. And I think fat has a satiety value itself. And, of course, you'd be looking for healthier fats, nuts and avocados. And there's lots of good examples. Olive oil, things like that. You just have to remember at 9 calories per gram, it's really energy dense, and you can't eat huge amounts of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually, for me at the moment, not trying to lose body fat, but trying to gain some muscle and bulk up. I've just been adding more and more. Only a certain amount of fats, but just handfuls of nuts at a time, and they're just so satiating.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're interested in muscle gain, that's sort of one of my specialties with young people who are power athletes in different ways. But full fat granola, dried fruits. This isn't really on the fat side of thing, but dried stuff, like whether it's just handfuls of dried fruits or it's part of a granola mix, those things are really handy, because when you dehydrate a food, it concentrates the nutrients and the calories. So dried fruits are great. Healthy fats, like you said, seeds and nuts, those are just fantastic. I'll push these guys and gals to do stir fries in the evening, olive oil on their vegetables and stuff like that, kind of liberally when they cook stuff up. So, yeah, it's another energy source, and I think we can't demonize fat.
Absolutely. And just a quick question on that, the dried fruits, Lonnie. Are they still, like you said about the nutrients, are all the nutrients still in there when they're dried fruits? Like, that's what I've like, some of my clients ask me that question, and I'm not sure what type of answer to give them, whether there is actually all the nutrients still in there, or had some, like, the water-based nutrients, because it's been dried, sucked out.
Yeah, well, the water, unlike boiling, like if you were to boil vegetables or fruits, you could leach out the water-soluble vitamins, for example, or some of the minerals, and then you discard that fluid. It'd be a problem. But when you eat dried fruits, the water is evaporated out. It's not like they're stewed and then that nutrient-rich fluid is discarded. So the water is slowly removed in a dehydrator, but the nutrients stay there, right? So the only thing that's going to evaporate is H2O. So they're left very concentrated. Now, I can't tell you they have all of the same, like every one of those phenols and antioxidants are all completely intact in those prunes, for example, or to have you dried apples or whatever. But they're still very nutrient rich, especially, again, for people who are trying to gain weight in a clean way instead of eating Big Macs for their calories.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Yeah, obviously, it's still a good way to get it in. But I think what people need to realize too is that it's so, like you said, it's so easy for people to be able to consume large amounts of dried fruit compared to, having like like 3 bananas versus a whole bag of dry bananas, which would end up like being like 10 or something silly like that.
Oh, absolutely. I think the portability of foods is key when it comes to weight gain, because you really need to eat beyond your hunger, right? Your body's hunger is a homeostatic mechanism. It wants you to weigh what you weigh now. And if you want to weigh more than you weigh now, you have to eat when you're not hungry, sort of on a schedule. I would never tell anybody to eat until they were sick. That's silly. But to your point, right, it's much more convenient to have some like dried cereal between your car seats, and you can kind of munch, or a gym bag snack that you can just kind of reach in and just munch throughout the day, because you've got to keep the calories coming, and healthy fats and dried fruits and the granola type things that sort of combine these things. They're a great way to keep it portable. So you're controlling your diet and your intake instead of sort of riding through life on your schedule on the whim of a fast food restaurant.
Okay, good to know. And coming back to like these side of things for nutrition, so we've talked about how much protein we want to be eating in a day. We've talked about how to keep satiated. What are some other things that you've used to help you lose body fat in the past when it came to nutrition side of things? Like, did you do any, I'm not sure how to explain it, any manipulated macronutrients or any of those type of things to help with your weight loss?
Yes. My personal formulation, I think, and I'm certainly not alone in doing this, but when I talk to guys backstage who would do target date diets, right, like 20 weeks hence, almost always carbohydrate restriction was the focus. But again, for the average person, I think they would have to decide, if I'm going to restrict which fuel, fat or carbohydrates, I need to take a look at my family history and my personal history and even my age, because by the time you're middle-aged, people tend to become poorer carbohydrate metabolizers and things like that. But when it comes to physique competition, I can tell you carbohydrates are the focus. Protein is kept consistent and fairly high, like we're saying, maybe a gram per pound of body weight. Fats also fairly consistent, maybe on the lower side. You will see athletes pull them out progressively over time, but it's mostly carbs. And the way I would do that is I would get a baseline. So I would suggest anybody in a very neutral, emotion-free, sort of scientist studying yourself kind of way, complete some diet records, get them analyzed. I know there's lots of Fitbit type software out there, MyFitnessPal, and there are governmental ones. Like we have fitnesstracker.gov or myplate.gov. There's some free, legitimate food entry, diet and analyzer type software programs out there that are web-based. They can be very handy. But so you get your baseline. So if my baseline, let's say, was 500 grams of carbohydrates a day in my off season, for the first couple of weeks, I would pull 50 grams per day out. So I'd drop to 450 for a couple of weeks, maybe 2. And then I would drop to 400 for a couple of weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks. And then I would drop to 350. And then I would have dropped to 300. So progressively over time, I'm pulling more and more calories, carbohydrate calories, out of my diet. And again, that's why those sorts of diets aren't always sustainable, because, again, by the time you're at the end of 20 weeks, you're eating very little carbohydrates. You're even shaved off quite a bit of the fat, and you're left eating almost entirely protein and fibrous vegetables, right? But that's that progressive type of pulling carbohydrates out, and then all the while over that 20-week period, adding in a little bit more and more fat-burning cardio. That's how I personally went about it. And I tend to be sort of thin and ectomorphic compared to a lot of the big powerlifters I know. So I had to do that very slowly and carefully, or I would lose muscle mass. And I think, in fact, that's something that my business partner, sort of media and education person, Kayla, she wanted me to mention was weight training and maintaining your muscle mass is just huge, right? Because you can't just focus on the calories you're burning in the gym. You have to actually think about burning calories 24 hours a day. And when you're training large muscle mass, protein, turning on protein synthesis or even inducing muscle soreness, that really raises your metabolic rate, even when you're outside of the gym. So resistance training is just such a huge part of a lot of this. that I think I'd be remiss unless I brought that up too. So, yeah, but carbohydrates are typically the focus, honestly, when it comes to at least the fitness competitors, and then the general population people would have to choose how much on the carbohydrate versus how much on the fat side they want to pull out. But either way, one of my big recommendations is get a baseline. You've got to know with complete honesty what your baseline calories and then protein, carbs, and fats, right, where your macros are, and then you can start shaving progressively carbohydrates or fats out of that baseline.
Excellent. And that's actually, speaking about completing a food diary and being aware of it, I actually get all my clients to do that when they're in the gym and they're like, oh, hey, we want to start cutting down weight. Well, I'm like, you got to start tracking your food so I can actually see what you're eating. Then we can work together to actually start seeing, like, because what you can't measure, what gets measured gets managed. And if you're just kind of guessing about, oh, I think I eat this much, or I'm not too sure, when you actually log it, it gives you a much, much broader perspective of actually what you're eating throughout the day. It's time for another episode of Tyson's Simple Tips. And today, since the topic is about hunger cravings, I'm going to share with you some of my top hunger craving killing tips. The first thing I want to share with you is apple cider vinegar. Now, apple cider vinegar is very acidic and it's very powerful to get those bad bacteria that are in your stomach that cause the sugar cravings. So if you find yourself having some type of sugary craving during the day, you can stop them in their track by using apple cider vinegar. Now, the one I like to use is, it's got to be raw, it's got to be organic, and there is a certain brand called Bragg's which does the best. You don't want to get it with honey, you don't want to get it with anything else, you want to get raw apple cider vinegar. And I'm telling you, one shot of that or mixing it in water is all you need to kill those hunger cravings and to keep them at bay. Another thing I like to do after a meal to avoid over snacking is to simply have a piece of chewing gum. Now, the reason I like to have a piece of chewing gum is because when you have that freshness in your mouth, it's kind of like after you brush your teeth. You don't want to eat anything afterwards, and there you go, your hunger cravings are gone. So if you want to stimulate something like brushing your teeth afterwards and you don't feel like eating, then having a piece of extra sugar-free chewing gum is a simple way to go. So there are two top tips you can use: apple cider vinegar and extra sugar-free chewing gum, and you can keep those hunger cravings at bay. Now let's get back into the episode.
It really does, and it helps you look at it, again, almost like a scientist, in that I work with so many people, and I bet you have too. They're frustrated. They'll come to you frustrated, like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm stuck. I don't know what's going on. So much like what you say, I say something very similar: is you can't control what you don't measure. So if you don't monitor it, what you think you're eating may not be what you're eating. And even with your best intentions, you're going to have some error in the portions that you eat and what you log into the software and that sort of thing. So I guess, monitoring is always going to be huge. There's only one population that I don't try to monitor calories and macros. And of course, that's going to be someone who's eating disordered and they're already obsessing over every gram of everything. So those people, for different reasons, you need to be careful. But almost all other groups, monitoring is just so important.
Absolutely. And so we've talked about those three big aspects of being able to lose weight with diet. So protein, keeping satiated, and then slowly restricting the carbohydrates over time. When it comes, like you said, weight training is very, very important, and of course it is, as well as other types of training. So what type of training modalities would you recommend for someone who's looking to lose some body fat?
Well, the old school bodybuilder side of me always liked the pre-breakfast cardio. I mean, I don't like the term cardio in that context because it's not intense. So the old school way bodybuilders would do this, and this is how I did it, was I would start in, let's say, the first month of a 5-month diet. I would walk for 45 minutes uphill on a treadmill, a light to moderate heart rate, a brisk uphill walk kind of thing. And I've actually gone into the exercise physiology lab with the metabolic cart and the mask, the mouthpiece, all of the above. And I've watched my RER, and you can see fat burning right on this type of equipment. And sure enough, you're just burning like 85-90% of all your calories from fat because you haven't eaten anything. Your blood sugar is sort of baseline. Your insulin concentrations in your blood is very low, and insulin is sort of a storage hormone, so that's out of the picture. Body fat is vulnerable, and so I would have a cup of black coffee just to help mobilize a little bit of extra fat. Get on the treadmill for 45 minutes, walk uphill watching a movie or something. I always like that approach as well because later in the day when I did my weights or I did some like high-intensity interval work, sprints and bike and that sort of stuff, the morning stuff didn't feel like a workout, right? I've had clients say, that doesn't even feel like I'm working out. And I'd say, exactly. This is just a fat-specific calorie drain. But you don't want to interfere with your ability to train later in the day. So I'm actually a fan of that. I like to get up a little bit earlier. I know not everybody can if you're already getting up super early, but some fasted or mostly fasted uphill walking to start your day. And then as a diet would progress, because I was concerned about my basal metabolic rate slowing, I would add in 15 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes every month, let's say. So maybe in month 2, I'm doing an hour. And then toward the end of the diet, I might even be doing 75 or 90 minutes. And again, that's getting a little crazy because it's cutting into your sleep. But, if you're going to get on stage and you need to be that lean, you will do that. But anyway, so I do like the what I call the tortoise approach, right? Anybody who wants to get lean, there's the tortoise and the hare approach, in my opinion. The tortoise approach is almost every single day. And you can do that because there's very little recovery involved. You're not crossing any stress hormone thresholds or anything like that. But the tortoise approach is almost every day. You go through maybe 350 calorie workout, just walking uphill. It's almost entirely fat that's getting oxidized. The hare approach is the interval stuff. And that's also very beneficial. I mean, you can see how lean and ripped sprinters look. And so I love that approach too. There's different ways to skin a cat. And I think for maximal leanness, I like to do a little bit of both. The interval work will build mitochondria and fat burning ability. And then in the morning when you get up and you're fast and you get on that treadmill, you're really putting those mitochondria to work to burn almost exclusively fat. So, and again, this is asking a lot, right? I'm asking myself at that point to do an hour-ish of pre-breakfast uphill walking, and then in the afternoons, I'm doing weight training and finishing the weight training session with some, bike sprints or whatever kind of sprints that I was going to do. So, yeah, but those are at least the way I look at fat burning is tortoise or hare.
Okay, awesome. So doing a little bit of fasted workout, and I think that's a really simple thing for people to be able to do. Going to the gym, go and put on a TV show. There's, you can stream Netflix to your phone now. So go and watch something and just walk uphill on a treadmill, and make the time pass by. One of my clients, he actually has been through. He's watched Game of Thrones, he's watched Sense8, he's watched them all, and he's managed to lose over 10 kilos just because every morning he would come in and do extra walking.
Nice. Yeah, really nice. 20, 25 pounds, that's good loss.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, it's I like it because there's very little recovery involved. It's just the discipline of, you can't do this twice a week. It's not going to add up fast enough. It's got to be almost daily, at least in my opinion. But I've known lots of people that lost easily 10 to 20 kilos just walking in the morning. I think it's a very natural movement. I don't think I would have a huge bowl of cornflakes before I did it, because again, I like the idea of direct fat burning, and that's a little bit more effective before you get into breakfast and and you start consuming things, getting your insulin concentrations up in your blood and all that. So it's good to hear that, right? I've heard from many people over the years that that kind of direct fat burning, that what I call the tortoise effect, tortoise approach, that does work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've in regards to that, so you talk about the more of the cardio side of things, but what about just in regards to weight training? When you started training with weights and you were trying to lose weight, did your volume change, or did the intensity change, or how did you manage to keep a good training session? Because I know it can be hard when you're depleting carbs to actually feel like you're having enough energy. What did you do to make sure that your training sessions were still on point, and how do you recommend people train?
Yeah, myself, I didn't feel a lot of crushing fatigue because honestly, if I start at a 500 grams of carbohydrates per day baseline, that's really high and that's excess, but and again, the morning sessions that I would do they don't really burn a lot of muscle glycogen or carbohydrates, so that's not really a problem. But again, yeah, you get into the last third of a 20-week diet, and you do start feeling fatigue. Your glycogen stores are lower. I've actually read peer-reviewed studies that it's somewhere on the order of 20% more fatigue when your glycogen stores are very low, and that sort of thing. So I would make sure I always had at least a little bit of carbohydrates in the morning to start my day, so I had the energy to go about things. So, again, oatmeal, something like that. And then right after a workout, I would usually try to get some carbohydrates in me again. So mornings and right after a workout, I'm always trying to replenish my glycogen stores, my carbohydrate stores, because I know they're so restricted. So, and then honestly, myself, I would lean on coffee a little bit, for that, the energy to get through a weight session and that sort of thing. Again, competition type leanness, it's not sustainable. And in that last month, yeah, that's not sustainable. In fact, I got into a very interesting discussion with the owner of a big supplement company that a lot of people would recognize, and he was insisting that dietary stimulants of some kind, caffeine, pre-workouts, herbal preps, they're actually requisite. They're required to get that lean. And I didn't want to have to agree with him on that, but I see where he's coming from with that, right? That you are more fatigued, and a little bit of, and let's face it, there are safe dietary stimulants like a good old cup of coffee or two that helps get you up in the morning and get you going, or even in the afternoon before you go to the gym. So that's kind of how I address that.
Okay. And obviously, speaking to who we're speaking towards at the moment, these people aren't going to be going on show. So guys, when it comes to supplements, I'm going to say you guys don't need the pre-workout supplements and things like that. A black coffee or a strong coffee is going to get you through your workout, because if you're not trying to get as lean as possible to 4 or 5% body fat and you're just trying to improve your health and fitness, having all those extra supplements when they're going to be spent on better quality food like vegetables and lean sources of protein to help keep you fuller is going to be a lot more beneficial for you in the long run. Like Lonnie's talking about, this is towards a show, not just general health and fitness to lose some body fat.
It's true, and I couldn't agree more. It's not just sort of be a good boy, be a good girl, eat your vegetables. They really are. Lean meats, lean protein sources, and tons of fiber-rich vegetables are way more effective than spending $60 on a bottle of some herbal stimulant or something like that, right? I would be a liar to tell you that those things didn't suppress appetite a little bit. I mean, stimulants in nature, or give someone additional energy to exercise, that sort of thing. The problem is, again, not sustainable. It's not the kind of thing I'm going to suggest to weight management clients for the long haul, because you can end up raising your stress hormone levels, and it really comes back to bite you in the end. Lee Haney, who was a Mr. Olympia many years, he used to say that pre-workouts and stimulants like that, they're borrowed energy. It's not real. Energy is calories, of course, and you can't just take a pill like some herbal stimulant and expect it to last for very long. Or, at some point you need to have the right kind of meal. You need to get 8 or 9 hours of sleep. You have to make this more sustainable in that way. So you're absolutely whole foods approach. It's not just better health. It's actually more effective in the magnitude of change that you get than just blowing the money on a pre-workout. In fact, that's something Kayla asked me to bring up too, is so many people, they go for the quick fix dietary supplement approach. They haven't thought through the math, right? The calorie balance numbers of this. So if someone says, oh, I lost 5 pounds this week, I'm so happy. It's like, well, if that was all fat, you're telling me you got in a 17,500 calorie deficit. No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Yeah.
The math is not going to work. Somebody says they lose 10 pounds, that's 35,000 kcal. You didn't get in that kind of a deficit. So when people want quick fix or a lot of the supplement type stuff, it's very short term. You might feel wired for a while and that sort of thing, but yeah, it's not fat that you're losing a lot of times on those sorts of quick fix approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, and that's why there's so many let's say, bounce backs, but most of the time it's just that huge water fluctuation of just going back and forth. When people do completely restrict their carbs for a couple of weeks and they go on the shakes and things like that. I mean, hey, yeah, you lost a lot of water, but that's going to come back very, very quickly too once you start introducing carbs straight back into your diet.
Very much. I mean, a lot of people need to realize each gram of glycogen. So your liver will hold maybe 70 to 90 grams of glycogen, stored carbohydrate. Your muscles, depending on how big you are, if you're a man or a woman, maybe 300 or 400 grams of glycogen. Each gram of glycogen is stored with 3 grams of water, give or take, from some early animal work. So your weight can fluctuate greatly, like you said, 5 pounds easily. So if you lose weight very quickly over the course of a day or 2 or a week, that's almost entirely water, or glycogen and the water following it as the glycogen comes and goes. And I think that's why the Atkins diets were so popular. Now, I like lower carbohydrate diets for a lot of reasons, low refined carb diets, but that's why people loved them so much. Oh, I lost 5 pounds this week. And in their ignorance, they thought that was fat, when in fact their muscle and liver glycogen stores got depressed after several days, and they ended up just having less water and glycogen and water storage.
Absolutely. And I think that's the big thing, talking about holding water in the body. It's also when people get stressed, whether they go and have a salty meal at night time, or they go somewhere that might be a little bit more rich in carbs, or water in general, and then people stress that they put on, I put on 1.5 kilos last night or 2 days, and it doesn't happen like that either. It's just because of the type of food you're consuming that might be higher in, let's say, like I said, water or sodium or carbohydrates, but it will, after a couple of days, fluctuate back to normal if you're not constantly in a calorie surplus either.
Oh, it's true. And you're right. People, they ascribe too much power to a single meal. You're right. There's no question it would be sodium or water balance or some glycogen storage. You might feel bloated. You might think you look like you have more body fat, but you really don't. Even if you eat a fairly big 1,000-calorie meal, that's less than a third of a pound of body fat. I mean, if we were to pretend it's entirely, lipogenic, entirely fat-inducing, less than a third of a pound. So, yeah, if you look different, I mean, we all know that to see weight change on our cells, body composition change, it really needs to be 5 or 10 pounds before you can see it across your whole body. And again, we're talking about 17 to 30,000 calories to induce that kind of real difference. So that's not going to happen in a meal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you go to a buffet and you see me there after a couple of weeks of dieting. And so we've covered 5 big things here, Lonnie. Look, we've talked about how much protein you need. We've talked about how to keep satiated with the whole foods, slowly dropping the carbs down. When it comes to training, you've got the tortoise and the hare approach, and our best thing could be doing the tortoise approach every day, and maybe the high intensity workouts, let's say twice a week between the weight training sessions. And we've also talked about to be able to sustain a good weight training session, you want to be having coffee and kind of fueling your workouts. So have a little bit of carbs before a workout and make sure you're replenishing that glycogen after your workout. And so they're the 5 big areas we've focused on. Now, what's one thing you like to do every day that's essential for your health and fitness, just in a general overview?
Well, I think a food item that I've been sort of tweeting about, and I just sent Chris Sugar at the testosterone.com website something about this, but I really love my oatmeal and blueberries in the morning. I'll throw a scoop of whey protein in there. It's steady blood sugar throughout the morning. It's some carbs. It's some high quality protein. So I love my oats and berries. I eat them not daily, but I don't know, maybe 4 times a week, 4 or 5 times a week. I'll sort of alternate with the sort of an egg beaters kind of breakfast. But from the weight training side, and I didn't address this when you asked earlier, but I think it's resistance, right? As you get leaner, you need to find some way to keep intensity in the picture. And that's going to be a little bit different for everybody. But I'm a little bit older now. I'm in my late 40s, so I'm not out to squat 405 for reps like I used to. I'm not a competitive bodybuilder anymore, but I still try to keep the weights fairly high. And when I used to diet for a competition, I would do that too. The last time I competed, normally, and again, it's relative to everybody, but so let's say I was doing sets of 8 with 405 in the squat. 2 weeks before I competed, I wanted to make sure I could do at least 1 or 2 reps with that. So I'm trying to keep the intensity, that is the weight on the bar, as high as possible. And I would just cut the volume if I had to, right? And that's quite different from what a lot of guys do. A lot of guys they'll go into this sort of toning mode, and they'll start doing high repetition everything. I'm not sure that's as good for holding onto your muscle tissue as trying to keep the weight up, the intensity up, that sort of thing. Now, of course, cardiovascular intensity is going to be more like a percentage of your VO2 max or a percentage of your heart rate reserve, something like that. But either case, always an eye on intensity. So for me, yeah, if I had simple rules that I follow on a weekly basis, fairly heavy weights, at least as much as my joints can take these days, and my oats and berries with the whey protein in the morning, those are things I just love.
Awesome. Well, Lonnie, I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing these really, really simple but effective tips that people can put in their lives and help them when it comes to losing body fat, making this the most, let's say, optimal way, but making sure you're keeping full during the day, making sure you're going to be able to maintain your muscle mass and having the energy to go through training to get the outcome you want at the end of the day. And like you said, you like to do longer, not longer dieting, but thinking about this from a long-term approach instead of going, okay, for the next 4 weeks, I'm going to go as hard as possible and completely cut everything, when at the end of the day it's not sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, the proof is in the pudding. I would talk to competitors who did very badly because they were small, and they would do 12-week diets, 15-week diets. And even the guys who would abuse performance-enhancing drugs, they would lose a lot of muscle mass, because they're in too much of a calorie deficit. They made the changes too fast. You have to have a progression model downward in a diet, again, in a target date diet, just like we have progression models to increase our performance. So you have to be able to be headed somewhere, right? The co-host of Iron Radio, Phil Stevens, he's in very much agreement with that. You have to be able to progress towards something. You don't start at the end. You start maybe just 10% different from your baseline, and then you head in a certain direction. And as you add with performance side, as you add weights or performance goals, or with the diet, as you start to slowly restrict over time, you have to have a progression model. And let me say one last thing. Diets, at least for me, they actually tend to become, when they're done properly and with a patient, slow progression, they actually can become a little easier over time. And one of the mechanisms behind that is really coming to light in the last 2 years, and that's the gut bacteria and your microbiome. Those change slowly over time. When you're eating lots of vegetables and quality foods, nuts and that sort of thing, slowly the bacteria will change, at least to some degree, their populations in your bowel, in your large intestines, and those affect your hunger and your mood and other things. I can tell you, I'm coming off of 5 months of doing something. I sort of did 70% of what I used to do when I would compete for a competition, and my hunger levels are down. I feel more satiated. I've been living on lean proteins and vegetables, and this sort of thing, and it actually becomes easier once you slowly start to get those gut changes in the bacterial populations in your gut. Patience, it's another reason to counsel patience, because after several weeks, things will actually become a little bit easier. You might think it's just psychological or habitual, but that could be your gut bacteria modifying your behaviors and your cravings.
Interesting. It's good. It's good that all, there's more and more research coming out about this and realizing how important the gut bacteria is for people, but just as easily knowing that you can change it over time. It's not a set strict rule. Like by eating certain foods, your gut bacteria is going to change.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think if they consume fermented milk products or they take a probiotic supplement, that's boom, they're going to completely rewrite their gut bacteria. That's not how it works. Frankly, you just get away from fast food. You get into lower sodium, higher potassium, fiber-rich vegetable type foods, and lean meats and in that sort of thing. Is you do slowly encourage these populations and of these bacteria and the way that they communicate by secreting different chemical compounds into your bloodstream and reaching your brain and that sort of thing. And the evidence really is mounting, as you say. So to me, it doesn't really change what you do as much because you're still eating that, more whole foods type of healthy variety in your diet. But it is nice to know that if I'm patient enough and I can make it to, say, week 6 or 8, things are really I'm a different person inside my large intestines. My gut bacteria are now different, and they're a little bit more on my side, and it's going to make things a little easier. So it's not just psychology. It might be your psychology being actually influenced, at least to some degree, by the organisms that we live in symbiosis with.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, it has a direct, the messages that it's from the gut sending to the brain could all be like the right thing.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, Lonnie, I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing all these helpful health and fitness tips that the guys can go and implement. Before you go, can you just give us a reminder of where we can find you again?
Sure. The ironradio.org website is also the home for our podcast. We have an article library there. We're primarily a weekly podcast, though, so ironradio.org. If you prefer, nutritionradio.org. It takes you to the same place. You can listen to our audio there. We're on iTunes. You can even find us on YouTube if you type in Lawnman07 or from within YouTube, or you type in Iron Radio, all one word, within YouTube. We actually back up our show on YouTube. We don't have many hits there. We don't pump it over there except as a backup. But if you listen to your podcast through a Roku or an Xbox or some type of device that it's easier to access YouTube, we put the audio on YouTube too. It's just audio, so don't expect a fun video feed. But those are the best ways to reach us.
Excellent. Well, guys, that is another podcast done and dusted. Make sure you go back, you listen to this one again, or you jump on the website and have a look at the show notes, because I've got all 5 of those top tips that Lonnie shares that are going to help you cut that stubborn belly fat, but at the same time maintain your muscle mass, and how to do it effectively. And I've also got the show notes where you can find them, because I really recommend that you go to their podcast and you listen to it. I've been listening to it for years now, and I love it. Until next time, guys, I will see you then.
Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. Now, I've got a special gift for you. If you want to learn how I managed to lose 10 kilos and keep it off, then I've got the perfect treat for you. I've got a free intermittent fasting cheat sheet that I share on my website that shows you exactly how to diet effortlessly with intermittent fasting and fit it into your busy lifestyle. And more importantly, this is the exact guide that I follow every single day that allowed me to lose 10 kilos of body fat and keep it off 4 years later. So head on over to www.tysonbrown.com.au and pick up your free cheat sheet today and learn how to fit intermittent fasting into your life and diet effortlessly. Once again, that's www.tysonbrown.com.au. Opt in for the free cheat sheet and I'm going to send it straight to your inbox for free. Until next time, speak to you guys then.